Okay, hi. So today I want to talk about my favorite read so far this year. So now that we're in June, I kind of want to chat through, after going through the first half of the year, some of the books that I've read so far this year, of like the 50 plus that I've read that have stood out to me. And then I kind of want to talk about some of my future reading plans for the year, which you could probably expect me to chat about in certain videos, and some of my video plans for the year. As you can probably tell if you've been watching my channel for a while, I don't post nearly as often as I used to, and I don't post every book that I read. So now my videos, for the most part, are more thematic. I attempt to post things that are videos that probably have more longevity for the most part. And so I have some exciting plans, and I have more videos coming up than my usual because I've had a few of my reading projects wrap up or be very close to being wrapped up. So this book I would consider more of a surprise than anything else, maybe a little bit more of an honorable mention, and it's called We Love the Nightlife. I was on a mission last year to find a vampire book that I liked. I'll link that video below. I had a lot of fun making it. And this book I didn't read for that, but it came up later in my TBR, and it's one of those books that, like, I think for me is kind of like fun trash. So, but it's not like a bad book, but it gives that like kind of more like, I don't want to call it a bad book, but it kind of gives like a trashy, like disaster woman kind of energy to it. So in this book, you're following two vampires. You're following this woman, and they're in London. You're following an American vampire who was made by the other British vampire, and they've been together for decades now, and you find them in a toxic dynamic, and it's dual perspective, so you're back and forthing between them. And in the American's perspective, who was made by the other vampire, you're kind of seeing her in modern time question a lot of things, and then in the other perspective, you're also seeing how she feels currently, but you're getting a lot of flashbacks to her life before she was turned into a vampire, and then her lead up to turning the American woman into a vampire. There's a lot about, like, a lot of intense female dynamics. There's a third woman that comes into play at a certain point in the book. There's like different vampire coven kind of things happening within the city of London. And overall, I just thought it was a really fun read. It wasn't anything exceptional, but it surprised me. And it's also, if you've watched my vampire video, it's also like my kind of vampire video where it's like very in your face, like this is a book about vampires doing vampire things, as opposed to like a lead up of like vampires being like a horror factor. The next one I'll put the superlative of my like favorite horror I've read so far this year. I don't read a ton of horror, but this is The Lamb by Lucy Rose, and this is like a very quiet, like folk horror where it takes place in this rural part of, I don't remember where it takes place. I want to say somewhere in the UK, and you're following a younger girl. I don't recall her age. She maybe is like 12 or something, but she kind of reads a little bit younger at times. And her mother is a cannibal, and they live on this property where people just sometimes show up there and then they eat them. And then this other third person, this woman, comes into play, and like the dynamics between the mother and this new woman unfold, and how it changes the relationship with the child. And this girl is going to school and is like dealing with bullying, and she also knows that she eats people, and so there's this very strange dynamic going on where she doesn't really know what she's doing is completely wrong, but knows she has to hide it. And I really loved how the author brought everything together and ended it. I just thought it was like a really well constructed horror novel. But if you don't like cannibals, like probably like not the best book because they're literally eating people and butchering people on the page. Okay, and then another superlative is my favorite 2025 release. So I'm not usually a front list reader, but I have been reading for a lot of front list books for the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do. And I actually have a video that should be coming out about that at some point in the future. And my favorite book so far that I've read published this year is a nonfiction. It's called No More Tears, and it is about the company Johnson & Johnson. It's really an expose about a lot of like the atrocious things that Johnson & Johnson has done behind the scenes while still having this very sparkly image to the customer and consumer. The intro starts kind of explaining what the author is going to go through. He promises a lot and he meets those promises. So there's so many different topics that he touches on, talking about baby powder that was knowingly sold with asbestos in it for over 50 years, Tylenol and acetaminophen being really close to the like safe dose for an over-the-counter, which caused acute liver failure and still does cause acute liver failure in folks. There's a chapter on antipsychotics and antipsychotics being prescribed to the elderly off-label for dementia use, even though there is no known use for it in dementia. The same antipsychotics being prescribed to children, which caused permanent side effects in a lot of children. Blood thickening drugs that were sold for use with cancer patients that actually cause the acceleration of tumor growth, which is horrible. And like, I could kind of go on and on. He dives into all these different topic areas, and the general overall theme is that Johnson & Johnson knew at some point. Johnson & Johnson hid the data about it at some point, and then Johnson & Johnson would try to keep this data. They would fudge numbers, they would lose court cases, they would try to keep things out of the courts. They did shadow recalls when they knew that they had bad product on the market. There's just so many shady practices. And if that's something that you're interested in, it kind of is of the same vibe as Empire of Pain and Bad Blood. Those two books are like, I love reading about that sort of nonfiction, so investigative journalism about the medical field or medical adjacent items. I highly recommend this book, especially if you use Johnson & Johnson products, which you probably do. Okay, and then the next one is more of like one of my reading themes that has really been going well for me. So I have been doing a project in 2025 where I'm reading nonfiction and fiction out of Africa. And I kind of went down this rabbit hole of nonfiction around books, nonfiction about the history of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I made a video about the nonfiction I read so far this year, but I've actually read another in this deep dive of the DRC. So I'll talk about them in like the actual chronology of the time eras they're talking about. So the first one is King Leopold's Ghost. This is the one that I've read most recently after I saw recommendations for it. This one follows King Leopold of Belgium as he stole the land of the DRC, how he did that, and then the atrocious labor practices that were used within the DRC. So really slave labor around the obtaining of ivory and then really rubber, and rubber from rubber vines, and then the kind of terrible practices that were occurring, how it was so obscured, how he was originally on a pedestal for his behavior in the DRC, even though he never set foot there, how he as a human actually owned this land as opposed to it being a colony of the state, and the people who kind of realized the harms that were being done and were involved in trying to bring him to justice through the vision of the time era, essentially. overall, I thought it was a really well-constructed book, really enjoyed it. Then the next one that is in the next kind of era is the Lumumba plot, which is about the DRC obtaining their independence from Belgium and the first democratically elected official being assassinated, and all of the intricacies on a global level, and then like the intricacies of the politics within the DRC, how Belgium as a colonizer really like set the DRC up for failure in some aspects, and then how this ties into kind of Cold War things occurring. Also a really good book, really great characterization of real life people. I really enjoyed this one. And then the last one in this topic area is Cobalt Red. This is much more modern. This is about current mining practices occurring in the DRC around the mining of cobalt specifically, but a lot of things are mined in cobalt or mined in the DRC. This is an investigative journalism piece where the author was really on the ground in these locations trying to track the trail of cobalt and essentially proved that dirty cobalt that's mined by children, cobalt that's mined via forced and slave labor, cobalt that's mined for pennies on the dollar, very dangerous conditions, makes it to the consumer, and the consumer being these electronic companies that claim that they're ethically sourcing their cobalt, which is a lie. I have another book that I want to read in this era, kind of in between the Lumumba plot and Cobalt Red, which is In the Footsteps of Mr. Kurtz, which is about, I think it picks up at the point of who succeeded Lumumba after he was removed from his democratically elected position, and the corruption that occurs thereafter. So that's another one that I have on my TBR. And then the last one that I want to talk about, which will lead kind of more into some of the books that I have on my agenda to read in the rest of the year, is a series that I've been reading that I've been really enjoying, which is Sevenwaters by Juliet Marillier. I read the first book last year, and I read the second through fifth book this year. Really loved the second, Son of Shadows. Really liked Child of the Prophecy. That's kind of like the first trilogy, and then there's a second trilogy, which I'm not loving as much. I did like the fourth one, Heir of Sevenwaters, and then the fifth one, I didn't really like at all. I'm buddy reading this with Mariana and Mariana Mouse Books, so we're both hoping that when we read the short story and then we read the sixth book, which is, I think, Flame of Sevenwaters, we're really gonna enjoy where it goes, hopefully. So excited to continue reading in that series. Some other things that I'm excited to read, I'm reading the Inheritance trilogy currently by N.K. Jemisin. I'm closing in on the end of the first book, and then I want to read her Great Cities duology, and then that will have me having read all of her main works and her main short story collection, in which case I will make a guide to her books, which I am excited to do. I enjoy her as an author. I think that she's very diverse in the types of stories she's telling, the magic she's playing with, and so I will be excited to be able to put that out at some point towards the end of the year, hopefully. Another thing that I have been thinking about doing forever, and I really want to commit to doing this year, is finishing off my Lord of the Rings spoiler-filled vlogging and reading The Hobbit, because I have not done that yet. So I know that The Hobbit is really short. I just psych myself out about the idea of reading it, because the vlogging experience is by far my most popular videos on my channel. People still comment on them today, which I really love. I feel like the Lord of the Rings community is very wholesome, and I want to continue on that journey because I've also not watched the movies, so I don't I only vaguely know the plot and that it involves Bilbo Baggins. Okay, and then I'm a fantasy reader, so we'll keep going through some of the fantasies I want to read. One of them is a trilogy that the third book is coming out next month, and that is the Forever Desert trilogy. Another one that I want to read is Sword of Kaigen by Wang. I've had this on my list for years and have not gotten around to it. So those are like the main areas of fantasy I want to get to and I'm prioritizing. There is another trilogy that I will most likely be reading as a buddy read with Mariana once we finish off our current series. So I might have another one that I end up making a video about. And then nonfiction is also a big part of my reading. I already told you about a book that I want to read about the DRC. I obviously have tons of other books on my TBR, but that I plan to read this year. But two of them that I'm more excited about is Careless People. This is an expose by someone who worked at Facebook and has been really popular. I've been waiting for this book as a library hold for months. So when that comes in, I'll be very excited to read it. And then another one that I've had on my TBR for years is Revolting Prostitutes. My library finally got an audiobook of this, so I put myself on the list and I'm waiting for it to come in, waiting for my hold to come in. Okay, and then I kind of want to just end the video with some of the videos that you can be expecting from me coming soon. I just finished reading a bunch of books by finance YouTubers, so I have already actually filmed that, so that will be out probably fairly quickly after this comes out. I really enjoyed that experience. As I said, I've been reading a lot of frontlist books, so I've read at least about one a month, sometimes more for the past year. So I've read at least one book that came out in that month, and I want to chat through that because that's a totally different experience for me. I'm not usually someone who reads frontlist. I never request ARCs. And I want to chat through that experience because I have a lot of things I want to reflect on. Like I said, I want to do that NK Jemisin guide. That'll probably be towards the end of the year. The vlog on reading The Hobbit. And then I will continue putting out videos about my experience this year reading books by authors from Africa and about Africa. So I'm sure I'll have another nonfiction one that'll come out at some point. One of those nonfiction ones, I want to be focused more on memoirs. I'll be coming out with one probably soon about short fiction that I've read. So anthologies, short story collections, and novellas. I'll come out with one about contemporaries. I have a lot of African classics on my list. I want to talk about books translated from African indigenous languages. So there'll be a lot of videos in that, a lot of videos around that project that will be coming out at some point this year. And I think that's all I have for this video. So I kind of just wanted to chat through things. I would love to hear about people's favorite books so far this year or genres that you've been particularly interested in. I would love to see your recommendations for me down in the comments below. If you wanted to kind of keep up with my current reading, I don't post a lot of reviews, but Goodreads would be the place to do that. I have a link to it in the description of this video. And so until next time, happy reading.